You know, it is genuinely wild how we approach the single biggest goal of our entire existence. Like we all just walk around operating under this assumed prime directive, right? I just want to be happy.
Right. It's the default setting for everyone.
Exactly. You hear it literally everywhere, applied to absolutely everything. Like, I just want my kids to be happy, or I just want a career that makes me happy, or even, I'm leaving this relationship because I'm just not happy anymore.
Yeah, it becomes the ultimate justification for almost every major life choice.
It really does. But here's the crazy part. If you actually stop someone on the street and you hand them a pen and a napkin and you ask them, okay, write down the exact functional definition of happiness right now, they completely freeze.
Oh, totally. They have no idea what to write.
None. We spend our entire lives, our best energy, and literally billions of dollars collectively chasing this thing that almost no one takes the time to actually define before they start running after it.
Well, it is the ultimate paradox of modern human behavior, honestly. We are just completely obsessed with the destination, but we categorically refuse to look at a map or even agree on what the destination looks like.
Yeah.
We're essentially sprinting full speed in the dark, just, hoping we accidentally collide with a deeply fulfilling life.
And that collision almost never happens by accident, which is exactly what we are fixing today.
Right.
Because the mission of this deep dive is we are not offering you a quick life hack today. We are not going to tell you to just, smile more.
No toxic positivity here.
Exactly. No toxic positivity where you just pretend everything is fine while the house is literally burning down. And we aren't looking for a temporary mood boost that wears off by lunch. Our mission today is to uncover the actual structural blueprint for lasting happiness.
The kind that actually holds up.
Yes, the kind that survives a genuinely bad Tuesday. The kind that holds up when the transmission in your car suddenly drops, or when you get that incredibly ambiguous, highly stressful email from your boss at like 4:55 p.m. on a Friday.
Because, if your happiness shatters the absolute moment you encounter ordinary, unavoidable life friction, it wasn't really happiness to begin with, was it?
No, it definitely wasn't.
It was just a fragile, good mood that was completely dependent on perfect environmental conditions.
Yeah.
And perfect conditions are, well, they're impossible to maintain.
They don't exist. So to figure out how to build the real thing, we have gathered an absolute mastermind group of sources for you today. We are pulling insights from some of the deepest, most rigorous thinkers on human flourishing.
It's an incredible lineup.
It really is. We're looking at the frameworks of Arthur Brooks, Shawn Achor, Gretchen Rubin, M. Scott Peck, and Dale Carnegie. And what we're doing is we're taking the common threads from all their research, their psychological models, their historical observations, and we are combining them into one master blueprint.
And what becomes immediately apparent when you synthesize all their work is this massive fundamental paradigm shift. It just completely upends the conventional wisdom on this entire topic.
Which we desperately need.
We really do. The central thesis we are working with today is simply this. Happiness is not a feeling you catch. It is a life you build.
A life you build.
Yeah, it's profoundly architectural. You do not stumble into it on a good day. You construct it beam by beam, habit by habit, relationship by relationship over years.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if happiness is an architecture, like a literal structure we have to build, that means most of us are showing up to the construction site using completely wrong building materials.
Oh, absolutely.
We are trying to build skyscrapers out of tissue paper. So before we can even think about building the right structure, we have to tear down the faulty foundation of how modern society currently defines this entire concept.
And we really have to start with the linguistic trap. It's what Arthur Brooks and others identify as the vague word problem. If you look at human needs, they're incredibly distinct. You have the need for stress relief, the need for existential peace, the desire for momentary physical pleasure, the drive for long-term success, the need for self-respect. These are entirely different neurological and psychological experiences.
Totally different.
But what do? We fold all of these complex, highly distinct needs carelessly into this one soft, mushy catch-all word, happiness.
It's the equivalent of walking into an emergency room with a systemic underlying infection and the doctor just hands you a topical numbing cream.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. Because you're treating the localized sensation, but the system is still failing. Like we have a crisis of meaning, we feel totally unmoored in our daily lives, and our culturally approved solution is to, go buy a new car, or endlessly scroll social media, or eat a highly palatable meal.
We're consistently trying to solve a structural lack of meaning with a fleeting hit of pleasure. And biologically, that is a recipe for disaster because you're trying to substitute dopamine, which is the neurochemical of anticipation and short-term reward, for serotonin and oxytocin, which are the neurochemicals of deep contentment and connection.
Which are so much harder to get.
They are. Because our definition of happiness is so muddy, people spend decades building a life that looks incredibly successful on paper, but never actually feels right on the inside. They basically optimized for the wrong neurochemical.
But, I mean, the modern world is essentially one giant, finely tuned machine designed to make us misdiagnose ourselves, right?
It's a brilliantly designed trap. The modern economy practically thrives on this exact misdiagnosis. It constantly offers us counterfeits for our deep needs.
Counterfeits, yeah.
It offers us endless, frictionless stimulation instead of actual contemplative peace. It offers us algorithms of comparison instead of grounded contentment.
What?
Yeah, and it gives us high visibility and metrics on social media instead of true, rooted, vulnerable belonging. We have been trained, almost since birth, to imagine that happiness is this peak emotional state, like a permanent high, that we can somehow secure, purchase, and lock into place permanently.
If we just get the right combination of consumer goods and status markers.
Exactly.
Which is such a bizarre expectation when you actually say it out loud. We think we can reach the top of the mountain and just live there, completely defying gravity and weather. But emotional states are inherently transient.
Precisely. They pass. So we chase the bright, shiny parts of life. The promotion, the exotic vacation, the perfect relationship, the goal weight. And look, when those things arrive, they do provide a surge of positive emotion.
Sure they do.
But the surge always habituates. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill. You get the new thing, your baseline spikes, and then you just adapt to it.
You get used to it.
Right. It rarely settles the deeper underlying unease. The surface of the life has been polished, but the load-bearing walls of the structure haven't been reinforced at all.
Which creates this wildly common, incredibly painful persona today. And I know you listening right now are either felt this deep in your bones or you work right next to someone who embodies this.
Oh, everyone knows someone like this.
It is the outwardly competent, inwardly unsettled adult. You are absolutely crushing it at work. Your calendar is perfectly color-coded. You are tracking your macros. You're optimizing your fitness, and your income is steadily going up. You are doing everything, quote-unquote, right.
But you are steadily losing your ease.
Exactly. You are achieving status, but you are totally restless at 2 a.m. You are becoming this incredibly efficient productivity machine, but you feel fundamentally less alive. And I want to ask you directly, listener, are you optimizing your performance but forgetting how to actually inhabit your own life?
That tension, that gap between outward optimization and inward emptiness forces a really important question. If the goal isn't just to relentlessly optimize our performance, and it isn't just to chase fleeting dopamine hits of pleasure, what is the actual target?
Right. What's the functional word we should be using instead of this vague, culturally corrupted idea of happiness?
The consensus among all these researchers gives us a much sturdier word. Flourishing.
Flourishing. I love that word.
This changes the entire paradigm. Because flourishing is not a mood. It's a durable condition. It's a structural state where your sense of meaning, your human connections, your daily habits, your self-respect, and your capacity to experience joy all begin to reinforce one another.
It implies a sort of wholeness.
Exactly. Wholeness. It is entirely unconcerned with emotional perfection. You can be flourishing and still have a terrible day. Flourishing is about all the major dimensions of your life working together in a synchronized way, rather than constantly fighting against each other.
So now that we know what we are actually aiming for, this durable architecture of flourishing, what are the actual raw materials we use to build it? Like, how do we mix the concrete?
This brings us heavily into Arthur Brooks's specific framework, which violently pulls us away from the trap of just chasing what feels good.
Brooks is so good on this.
He's incredibly useful here because he strips away all the mysticism. He treats happiness not as an emotional weather event, but as a form of macronutrition.
Macronutrition, right.
Yeah. And he argues that human flourishing requires 3 non-negotiable macronutrients or pillars: enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. If you try to build a life missing any one of these 3, the structure ultimately collapses under its own weight.
Okay, let's examine pillar 1, enjoyment. And I want to be really clear here, because sometimes when we talk about, deep work or meaning on this show, it sounds incredibly dour.
Like it has to be miserable.
Right. But a joyless seriousness is not a sign of maturity. It is just a sign of deprivation. We need beauty. We need to laugh until our ribs hurt. We need physical affection, great food, and the ability to celebrate small, ridiculous wins.
Absolutely.
If your life is just a grim, stoic march of endless productivity, you are doing it wrong. Enjoyment is the sweetness of the human experience.
It is the sweetness, yes. But, and this is a big but, Brooks makes a crucial biological and psychological distinction here. Enjoyment is not the same thing as pleasure.
Oh, this is the best part.
It's so important. Pleasure is purely limbic. It's animalistic. A monkey can experience pleasure from eating a piece of fruit. Enjoyment, however, happens when you take a raw pleasure and you run it through the prefrontal cortex of your brain.
You add the human element.
Exactly. You add memory, you add social connection, you add gratitude. Eating a burger alone in your car is pleasure. Grilling burgers in the backyard with your closest friends while the sun goes down is enjoyment.
That is a massive distinction. You are elevating the raw sensation.
Yeah, you are. But even with that elevation, there is a critical limitation to this first pillar. Novelty inevitably weakens. Comfort always adapts.
Right.
If you arrange your entire architecture only around feeling good in the present moment, even if it's high-quality enjoyment, you will eventually become spiritually malnourished. A life dedicated purely to enjoyment has a tremendous amount of sensation, but it lacks structural depth. When a real storm hits, enjoyment offers zero protection.
Which naturally requires pillar 2, satisfaction. And satisfaction is a completely different animal, isn't it?
It operates on an entirely different mechanism. Satisfaction asks much more of you than enjoyment does. Satisfaction is the profound, quiet sense that your life is being well used.
Well used. I like that.
And what is endlessly fascinating here is that satisfaction actually requires the introduction of elements that are the exact opposite of pleasure. To get satisfaction, you have to introduce friction. It requires fatigue. It requires effort, delay, and highly focused hard work.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second, because the whole promise of modern technology is to eliminate friction. Like, we have instant delivery, instant entertainment, instant communication. We're constantly told friction is the enemy of a good life.
And that is exactly why we are so dissatisfied. Behavioral economists call this the IKEA effect.
No, like the furniture.
Like the furniture. We place a disproportionately high value on things we assemble ourselves, precisely because it required our effort. You do not get satisfaction from simply having a meal delivered to your door. You get a spike of pleasure from that.
Right, but it's empty.
Exactly. You get deep satisfaction from spending 3 hours cooking a complex meal, or training for 6 months to run a marathon, or spending years mastering a difficult craft. Satisfaction is the psychological reward for enduring friction. It gives you the bedrock sense that your days are actually adding up to something permanent.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. But even satisfaction has a ceiling. Because you can be a highly satisfied, incredibly hardworking executive or a surgeon who puts in massive effort, endures a ton of friction, achieves everything they set out to do, and then suddenly wakes up at 50 years old, looks at their corner office and says, "What was this all for?"
The midlife crisis.
Yes. And that terrifying question brings us to pillar 3, meaning. Meaning is the ultimate why. Why am I putting in this effort? Why am I enduring this specific friction?
Because without meaning, effort is just exhaustion.
That's a great way to put it.
It really is. Meaning doesn't magically eliminate pain or difficulty from your life, but it fundamentally alters the role that pain plays. When you have a deep sense of meaning, difficulty doesn't register as a random, chaotic punishment from a cruel universe. It is placed inside a larger, coherent narrative. It makes endurance not just possible, but noble.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I think we have a massive branding problem with the word meaning. Because when people hear meaning or purpose, they immediately think of purpose with a capital P.
Oh, the grand destiny.
Right. They think, oh, great, my life isn't meaningful unless I quit my corporate job, move to a developing nation, cure a rare disease, and start a global charity. And that pressure is incredibly paralyzing.
It is entirely paralyzing, and it represents a complete misunderstanding of what purpose actually does within the architecture of happiness. Purpose is not about the scale of your impact. It is about the orientation of your attention.
Exactly. Purpose does not have to be glamorous. It rarely is. It simply means that your days are oriented around a central axis, rather than scattered to the wind.
Yes.
It can be a deep, quiet, unrelenting devotion to raising your children well. It can be an honest commitment to being the pillar of your local neighborhood. It could be a dedication to becoming a master of a very obscure, unglamorous trade. It just means you know what you are serving.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see why happiness absolutely cannot survive what the researchers call drift. A purposeless life is structurally weak because it lacks a center of gravity.
Right, you're just floating.
When you do not have a defined direction, you end up being governed by whatever forces are strongest in your immediate environment. You are governed by whatever is easiest, by the loudest distraction, or by whatever the people around you happen to be doing. That isn't freedom. That is just drift disguised as choice.
And when people feel that drift, that terrifying sense of floating, what is the default modern solution? They try to cure the drift with status.
Ah, yes.
This is such a crucial distinction to make.
Yeah.
Status and purpose are entirely different structural materials.
They are completely opposed in how they function in the human brain. Status is an evolutionary mechanism for tracking hierarchy. It constantly asks the question, how do I rank compared to the person next to me?
Which sounds exhausting.
It is, because immediately, by definition, it produces comparison, threat detection, and anxiety. Purpose, on the other hand, asks the question, what am I serving? Which produces direction and groundedness.
Status keeps your peace incredibly fragile. Because no matter how high you climb, someone can always come along and outrank you. A new billionaire is minted, a younger athlete comes along. But purpose steadies your life because it relies entirely on your own internal commitments. No one can outrank your devotion to your own family.
Absolutely. So we have these pillars: enjoyment, satisfaction, meaning. But satisfaction and meaning both inherently require effort, friction, and work well. This forces a direct confrontation with the biggest lie we are sold today.
The comfort lie.
The pervasive lie that if you are doing life right, if you have achieved the right level of success, life should eventually become effortless and perfectly comfortable.
Which brings us to M. Scott Peck. And we have to talk about his famous opening line because it hits like a bucket of ice water.
Yeah.
He starts his entire framework with 3 words. Life is difficult.
And it's so important to understand that this is not a cynical, pessimistic statement. It is a profoundly clarifying one. It is an act of psychological liberation.
How is being told life is hard liberating? I mean, most people would hate to hear that.
Because of the expectation gap. If you subconsciously believe that life is supposed to be easy, then every time you encounter difficulty, you think something has gone terribly wrong. You think the universe is targeting you, or that you are a failure.
Right, you take it personally.
But if you accept that life inherently includes difficulty, that difficulty is the baseline, then you stop fighting the reality of friction. True flourishing cannot possibly mean a state of permanent ease. But because modern culture worships comfort, comfort has become a very dangerous, seductive counterfeit for happiness.
It is incredibly dangerous. I think about this mechanically. Imagine a car driving on a road. We think we want a perfectly smooth ride with 0 resistance. But if you actually remove all the friction between the tires and the road, what happens? You are driving on pure ice.
You have no control.
Exactly. The wheels spin, you have 0 control, and you crash. You need the friction of the asphalt to grip the road and actually propel the vehicle forward. Without resistance, there is no forward motion. But in our lives, the second we hit a patch of friction, like a tough, awkward conversation with a spouse, or a project at work that requires actual intense focus, we interpret it as a sign that our lives are horribly off course. We bail out to find the ice again.
And when comfort becomes our supreme, unbending standard, we experience a catastrophic loss of resilience. We grow fragile. The architecture becomes brittle.
But the nuance here is crucial because we also don't want to just be martyrs, wandering around looking for suffering just to prove we are tough. And that brings in Gretchen Rubin's vital distinction between right strain and wrong strain.
What's fascinating here is how we categorize effort. The goal is not simply to increase the gross tonnage of suffering in our lives. That is pathological. But we absolutely need the right kind of suffering.
What's the wrong strain?
Wrong strain is the friction you create yourself through bad design and bad habits. It is driving your car with the parking brake firmly engaged. It is the chaos of poor boundaries. It's staying up until 2 a.m. doom scrolling on your phone and then suffering through a critical meeting the next day with brain fog. That is pointless, destructive suffering.
It is entirely self-sabotage.
Yes, but right strain is the friction that is inherently required by the things that actually hold deep meaning. A loving 20-year marriage requires right strain. It requires the strain of apologizing when you don't want to and the strain of listening when you are tired.
Right.
Honest, masterful work requires right strain. Raising children requires massive, unrelenting amounts of right strain. If you try to eliminate right strain from your life in the pursuit of comfort, you inadvertently eliminate every single source of deep meaning.
Which totally flips how we view discipline. I feel like discipline has the worst PR team in the world.
It really does.
We think of it as this oppressive, fun-ruining, rigid force. Oh, you have discipline, you must be so boring. But Peck argues that discipline is actually the primary guardian of your happiness.
It is the architecture of freedom. Because human beings are terrible at predicting the future cost of present comfort. The pain of delaying gratification right now, saying no to the impulse, is infinitely lighter than the crushing weight of long-term regret.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The immediate, localized pain of having a difficult, highly honest conversation today is infinitely lighter than the systemic pain of a marriage slowly disintegrating over 10 years of unspoken resentment. Discipline simply protects your future flourishing from your present impulses.
Okay, so we've established the internal framing. We need meaning to anchor us, we need to actively accept right strain, and we need discipline to protect the structure. But an architecture doesn't just float in a void in outer space.
No, it doesn't.
It exists in a neighborhood. It is built on a plot of land right next to other structures. Happiness is profoundly, unavoidably relational.
And this exposes a massive, glaring blind spot in the modern wellness industry.
Oh, completely. If you look at how happiness is marketed to us today, the wellness industry treats it like a completely solitary single-player game. It is all about my meditation app, my gratitude journal, my personal boundaries, my hyper-optimized morning routine, my self-actualization. It traps you entirely inside the project of the self.
Dale Carnegie's work provides the perfect historical and psychological antidote to this hyper-individualism. He understood a fundamental truth about human neurobiology. Our internal unhappiness is heavily aggravated by the external emotional climate we create around ourselves.
Right.
You can sit on a cushion and meditate for 2 solid hours a day, achieving perfect zen, but if you walk into the kitchen and immediately start criticizing your partner's tone of voice, your existence is going to be heavy. Worry, defensiveness, and chronic irritation are not just private internal feelings, they are atmospheric pollutants. They pollute the shared air.
It makes the act of existing heavier for everyone in the room, which ultimately reflects back on you. And Carnegie's cure for this suffocating self-preoccupation is brilliant in its simplicity.
He argued that the fastest way to improve your own emotional state is to take a genuine, uncalculated interest in others.
Yes. And I want to pause here because I think a lot of people hear Dale Carnegie and they think of like 1930s salesman tactics.
The whole how to win friends and influence people stereotype.
Exactly. They think of it as a networking trick. Oh, ask people about their hobbies so they like you and buy your insurance. But that is entirely missing the psychological depth of what he meant, isn't it?
It is entirely missing the point. Taking an interest in others is not a manipulation tactic. It is an escape hatch for your own brain. When you are excessively self-preoccupied, when your internal monologue is constantly asking, how am I doing? How do I look? Am I being respected? Why don't I feel perfectly happy right now? Your ego becomes a claustrophobic, oxygen-deprived room.
You're just trapped in there.
You are trapped in a rumination loop. Taking a genuine, curious interest in the complex reality of another person's life is how you force the door open and walk outside into the fresh air. It literally shifts your brain's default mode network away from self-referential anxiety. It frees you from the tyranny of your own mental weather.
And when you step out of that room, it changes the actual physics of the space you occupy. Shawn Achor talks extensively about emotional contagion, and the science here is wild. We have mirror neurons in our brains. Emotional states literally spread like viruses through a population.
Very real.
A truly grateful, deeply grounded person physically changes the physiological atmosphere of a room just by being in it. They lower the collective cortisol levels.
Conversely, the ultimate relational poison, the true destroyer of the architecture, is bitterness. Resentment is absolutely devastating to the structure of flourishing. When you allow a perceived wrong to harden into resentment, it physically narrows your perception of reality.
It makes the world so small.
It does. You stop seeing opportunities. You stop seeing beauty. It makes the inner world incredibly crowded with old injuries. And worst of all, when you are deeply, fundamentally resentful, the experience of joy actually feels like a betrayal of your anger. You subconsciously refuse to let yourself be happy because you are so fiercely committed to the identity of being wronged.
I want you to really deeply hear that, listener. Take a mental inventory of the relational habits you are embedded in right now. Are you currently pursuing your personal, private happiness, doing your cold plunges, reading your self-help books, repeating your mantras, while simultaneously maintaining a relational life that is full of quiet contempt, emotional avoidance, or passive aggression?
Because if you are, your blueprint is fundamentally flawed.
Exactly.
Right.
You cannot build a durable, happy life on a foundation of relational toxicity. The concrete will never set.
This naturally brings us to a crucial transition in our understanding. It is very easy, almost intoxicating, for us to sit here in the abstract and agree with all this philosophically.
Sure, it sounds great in theory.
Right. Yes, deep meaning is good. Yes, human connection is vital. Yes, we must let go of our bitterness. But how does this grand architecture actually hold up on a random, exhausting, rainy Tuesday in November when the kids are screaming the dog threw up and everything at work is going wrong?
Right. Philosophy is great until you get punched in the mouth by a Tuesday. We need the daily blueprint. How do we live this out when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m.? And this is where Gretchen Rubin's extensive work on the mechanics of daily repetition becomes absolutely essential.
Because happiness is not an event. It is not a sudden magical transformation caused by a single moment of profound cinematic insight. You do not read one profound quote on social media and suddenly flourish forever. Happiness is an act of relentless maintenance. It is maintained strictly through daily, unglamorous habit.
Okay, but I have to push back here violently because I get so incredibly exhausted by generic life advice and these rigid militaristic routines. You know exactly the ones I'm talking about, the billionaire morning routines.
For the 4 a.m. club?
Yes. The internet tells me that to be happy, I must wake up at 4 a.m., immediately submerge myself in a freezing ice bath, drink hot lemon water, journal my intentions for an hour, and then run 10 miles before the sun even comes up. If I actually tried to do that, I am aggressively miserable, and I just feel like a profound moral failure by 7:15 a.m.
And Rubin's entire framework completely validates your frustration. She argues that habits absolutely must fit the actual biological person living the life, not some idealized fantasy version of yourself you invented on New Year's Eve.
Thank goodness.
Some people are natural larks. Their chronotype thrives on rigid early morning routines. Others are owls who need variety, flexibility, and slow mornings. If you forcefully adopt a habit that fundamentally clashes with your innate temperament, you will not sustain it. It requires too much willpower friction.
And then you just feel guilty.
And then, as you perfectly described, you interpret that inevitable mismatch as a moral failure or a lack of discipline. But it isn't a moral failure. It is simply a design error in your architecture. You use the wrong material for the load.
That is incredibly freeing. A design error, not a character flaw. So the assignment is to become a student of your own actual life, not someone else's highlight reel, what actually makes you feel steady. But alongside our physical logistical habits, we have to talk about our cognitive habits. Because Shawn Achor's research on mindset completely alters how we understand our environment. He proves mathematically that we don't actually live in objective reality.
We absolutely do not. We live entirely inside our interpretation of reality. And this is vital. Two people can experience the exact same objective setback at work, say, a project proposal gets rejected.
Okay.
One person's brain automatically interprets it as a total catastrophe, undeniable proof that they are a massive imposter and a clear sign that they should quit the industry. The other person's brain interprets the exact same rejection as a specific, highly localized, temporary problem that can be solved by tweaking the data. The objective reality is identical. The interpretation dictates the amount of suffering.
And Achor shows that you can actively train the interpretive mechanism of the brain. The brain has a filter called the reticular activating system. It is why when you buy a red car, you suddenly see red cars everywhere. They were always there, but your brain is now prioritizing them.
Right.
Small, daily mental practices like genuinely forcing yourself to scan the world for 3 specific things to be grateful for, or reflecting on small wins before bed, they literally change the brain's default orientation. You stop defaulting to evolutionary threat scanning, and you start defaulting to possibility. You are quite literally rewiring the electrical system of your house.
But as we meticulously wire the house and install these positive habits, we have to be incredibly vigilant about what we can call the quiet destroyers.
The termites.
Yes, the termites. These are the forces that silently, imperceptibly erode your daily architecture. They don't blow the house up with a dramatic stick of dynamite. They eat the foundation while you are sleeping.
The first termite is comparison. Oh, comparison is so utterly brutal. It takes a completely sufficient, beautiful, functional life and forces it to answer to a completely fictional narrative.
It really does.
You can be perfectly, deeply happy with your home sitting in your living room until you open an app and see your friend's massive new renovations. And suddenly, in a matter of seconds, your perfectly good home feels suffocatingly inadequate.
Arthur Brooks notes that status and comparison are deeply unstable structural standards for happiness because they inherently cannot produce rest. It is mathematically impossible. There is always someone wealthier, more conventionally attractive, or more visibly productive.
Always.
If your sense of worth is conditioned on relative position on being better than, then another person's success quietly, inevitably becomes your personal threat. You live in a state of constant low-grade defensive anxiety.
The second quiet destroyer, according to Carnegie's framework, is worry. And worry is so insidious because it disguises itself as maturity. It masquerades as responsibility, like, I'm not anxious, I'm just being prepared.
Oh, that's such a common trap.
Right. No, you are dragging your entire central nervous system into a theoretical future that does not exist yet. You are consuming the actual, tangible, present moment to protect a future you ultimately have zero control over.
A profoundly worried life isn't actually a safer life. It is just a smaller life. Your negativity bias is hijacked by modern ambiguity. You spend your finite time in anxious anticipation of tragedy rather than actual participation in reality.
And the third quiet destroyer, and this might be the most common one, is just pure exhaustion and material reality. Rubin is so relentlessly practical about this. Sometimes you are sitting on your couch at 8 p.m. thinking you are having a profound existential crisis. You think you lack ultimate meaning. You think your career is a joke. You think your marriage is failing. But actually, objectively, you just lack sleep.
You're just tired.
Your biology is failing. You cannot outthink an overstimulated, digitally saturated, physically depleted reality. You don't need a philosophy degree or a deep dive into your childhood trauma. You need an 8-hour nap, a glass of water, and to turn off your phone.
It is the ultimate practical realism. You cannot force a severely depleted biology to produce philosophical steadiness. The mind cannot operate beautifully when the body is in survival mode.
Exactly. So let's step back and look at the whole project. Let's say we are doing the hard work. We have defined our meaning. We are actively accepting the right strain. We are focusing outward on others instead of staring in the mirror. We are designing habits that actually fit our innate nature, and we are managing our sleep and our attention. What is the ultimate result of all this construction? When the house is finally built, what is the capstone?
When you combine all these elements, the byproduct isn't just a perpetually good mood. A good mood is just weather. It changes with the barometric pressure.
Yeah.
The capstone of this entire architecture is character and deep self-trust.
And this is where we really have to dismantle the modern pop psychology fallacy of self-esteem. For decades, we've been constantly told to just believe in ourselves. We are told to look in the mirror every morning and recite positive affirmations about how amazing we are. But the psychological frameworks we're looking at sharply critique this idea of forced, unearned self-esteem.
Because you cannot manufacture deep self-regard without empirical evidence. The human brain is an evidence-gathering machine. You cannot trick your own subconscious into respecting you if your daily actions do not warrant respect.
So how do you actually get the evidence? How do you build unshakable self-trust? Peck's framework is so brutally clear on this. You build self-trust by keeping promises to yourself even when no one is watching. You build it by telling the truth faster, even when it's uncomfortable. You build it by doing the hard thing before the excuse has time to thicken and solidify in your mind.
What's fascinating here is the absolute inverse of that truth. You cannot be deeply happy while continually betraying yourself.
Oof, that's a strong statement.
But it's true. If you are constantly lying to yourself, avoiding your actual responsibilities, and consistently choosing short-term relief over long-term integrity, your inner world will remain fundamentally unstable. It does not matter how much money, status, or external validation you acquire. If you know deep down that you are full of it, the house will always feel like it is shaking.
Which totally, completely redefines what confidence means. In our culture, we usually think of confidence as bravado. We picture the loudest person in the room, the person who feels completely invincible, the person dominating the conversation and projecting absolute certainty.
But true confidence, the kind that arises from a well-built, highly integrated life, is remarkably quiet. It isn't about feeling invincible or never having doubts. It is the earned, deeply rooted, empirical sense that you can rely on yourself to meet life as it comes. It is the core knowledge that whatever happens today, whether I succeed or fail, I will not abandon myself.
I will not abandon myself. That is incredibly powerful. That is the bedrock. And when you have that quiet confidence, when you aren't constantly burning energy trying to protect a fragile ego, you finally create the internal bandwidth for joy. And we have to make this final beautiful distinction before we wrap up. Pleasure versus joy. Pleasure is immediate, it is consumable, and it is largely solitary. You can pull out your credit card and buy pleasure.
But joy is much fuller and much more demanding. Joy requires gratitude, it requires profound presence, and above all, it requires receptivity.
Receptivity, yes.
Yeah.
You have to be able to actually receive it. If your life is overmanaged, overhurried, and obsessively focused on efficiency and productivity, you literally do not have the cognitive or emotional bandwidth to receive joy. Joy lands lightly, like a butterfly, and if you are constantly swatting frantically at the air trying to control everything, it can't land on you.
Synthesizing the final observations of all these researchers gives us the ultimate picture of what we are building. Flourishing is a well-built structure. And here is the most crucial, comforting, and realistic truth of all. A well-built life still contains sorrow. It still contains profound grief, unfair struggle, and sharp pain.
Building this architecture doesn't make you bulletproof. It doesn't put a force field around your life.
No, it absolutely does not. But sorrow inside a well-built life does not destroy everything. When a hurricane of grief enters a structurally sound house, the walls do not collapse. The architecture can actually hold the tremendous weight of the sorrow without fracturing. That is the ultimate test of flourishing. Not the naive absence of pain, but a structural integrity so strong that pain does not have the final authority over your existence.
So, to bring this all home for you, the listener, the ultimate summary, the blueprint you can walk away with today is this. Do not chase the feeling of happiness directly. If you stare directly at it, if you try to grab it, it vanishes like smoke. Instead, focus entirely on building the life from which happiness naturally emerges as a byproduct. Tell the truth sooner. Choose the right strain over the wrong strain. Serve something beyond your own reflection. Interrupt your infinite worry cycles. Cultivate a genuine, deep curiosity in the people around you.
This raises one final, highly provocative thought to leave you with, extending the logic of everything we've discussed today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If lasting happiness is indeed this internal architecture that we painstakingly build over years to house our own individual lives, our distinct meaning, our aligned habits, our earned character, what happens when we inevitably invite someone else into that house? Can two perfectly built, highly independent, rigid architectures ever seamlessly merge? Or is the ultimate final test of our happiness not how impeccably strong our individual walls are, but how incredibly willing we are to tear some of them down, risk the profound vulnerability, and build a completely shared foundation in the unpredictable, wild terrain of someone else's life?
Wow, that is the exact question to carry with you for the rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I really hope it shifted something for you. Take a hard look at your own blueprints today. Stop endlessly chasing the feeling and start doing the deep work of building the house. We'll see you next time.